The Musketeers Save the Queen, from The Three Musketeers, by Alexandre Dumas. Dramatic interpretation by
Paula Hershey,
Leonard Sloan, and Neal Hunt. This special edition, all rights reserved, copyright 1981, by Audio Literature Group Limited. The Musketeers Save the Queen. In the year 1625, a young man named D'Artagnan came from the provinces to seek his fortune in Paris. He became the protege of the powerful Monsieur de Treville, the sworn enemy of the brilliant Cardinal Richelieu, and the intimate friend of the most famous swordsmen in Europe, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. D'Artagnan was in time assigned to the king's guards, with the promise, if he served the king well, of promotion to the corps of the Musketeers. Thus, D'Artagnan was always on the lookout for ways to acquit himself nobly in the eyes of Louis XIII, of Treville, and of his comrades. One morning, just such an opportunity presented itself when he was visited by his landlord.
I have heard speak of Monsieur D'Artagnan as a very brave young man, and his reputation, which he justly enjoys, has determined me to confide a secret to him.
Speak, monsieur.
I have a wife who is a seamstress to the Queen.
Ah!
She was carried off yesterday morning as she was coming out of her workroom.
By whom, sir, was your wife carried off?
I suspect a man who pursued her a long time ago.
The devil!
But I am convinced that there is less love than politics in all this.
Less love than politics, hmm? And what do you suspect, monsieur?
Monsieur, you appear to be an honest young man, and I will place confidence in you. I believe that love has nothing to do with the carrying off of my wife as regards herself, but it has been done on account of the amours of a much greater lady than she.
Ah. Can it be on account of the amours of Madame de Bois-Tracy?
Higher, monsieur, higher.
Of Madame de Guillon?
Higher, much higher.
Of the...
Yes, monsieur.
Mon Dieu. And with whom?
With whom can it be, if not with the Duke?
The Duke of Buckingham?
Yes, monsieur.
But how do you know all this?
I know from my wife. She was placed by the confidential valet of the Queen near Her Majesty in order that our poor Queen might at least have someone in whom she could place confidence. Abandoned as she is by the King, watched as she is by the Cardinal, betrayed as she is by everybody, my wife confided to me that the Queen at this very moment entertains great fears. The Queen believes that someone, probably the Cardinal, has written to the Duke of Buckingham in her name to make him come to Paris, and when in Paris, to draw him into a trap.
The devil! But your wife, monsieur, what has she to do with all this?
Her devotion to the Queen is known, and they wish either to remove her from her mistress or to intimidate her in order to obtain Her Majesty's secrets, or to seduce her and make use of her as a spy.
Ah, sacre bleu.
Seeing you constantly surrounded by musketeers of a very superb appearance, and knowing that these musketeers belonged to Monsieur Treville and were consequently enemies of the Cardinal, well, I thought that you and your friends, while rendering justice to our poor Queen, would not be displeased at having an opportunity of giving His Eminence the Cardinal an ill turn.
That night, D'Artagnan related to his friends, word for word, all that had passed between him and his landlord. When he had finished his story, he rose. Do not let us lose time. Let us separate and let us seek the landlord's wife. That is the key of the intrigue. Porthos spoke.
Well, let us in the first place make a bargain with the landlord, and a good bargain, too.
That's unnecessary, for I believe if he does not pay us, we shall be well enough paid by another party. And now, gentlemen, all for one, and one for all. That's our device, is it not?
All for one, and one for all.
That's well. Now let everyone retire to his own home. And beware, from this moment, we are at war with the Cardinal. The invention of the mousetrap does not date from our days. As soon as societies had invented any kind of police, that police, in its turn, invented mousetraps. The apartment of Master Bonacieux, the landlord, became such a mousetrap. Whoever appeared there was taken and interrogated by the cardinal's people. It must be observed that, as a private passage led to the second floor, in which D'Artagnan lodged, those who called to see him were exempted from this. Nobody came there but the three Musketeers. They had all been engaged in earnest search and inquiries for the missing wife, but they had discovered nothing. As to D'Artagnan, he did not stir from his apartment, which he converted into an observatory. From his windows he saw all visitors who were caught, and having removed some of the boards from his floor, till nothing remained but a simple ceiling between him and the room below, in which the interrogations were carried out, he heard all that passed between the inquisitors and the accused. One evening, a knocking was heard at the street door. It was instantly opened and shut. Someone was taken in the mousetrap. D'Artagnan flew to his listening post and laid himself down on the floor at full length to listen.
I tell you I am mistress of the house, gentlemen. I tell you I am Madame Bonacieux. I tell you I belong to the Queen.
D'Artagnan then went straight down to the door and knocked. I will go myself and be caught in the mousetrap, but woe to the cat that shall pounce upon such a mouse. The knocker had scarcely sounded on the hand of the young man, then the tumult ceased, steps approached, the door was opened, and D'Artagnan, sword in hand, rushed in. 10 minutes. 10 minutes sufficed for defeat and flight of the inquisitors, and D'Artagnan remained behind, master of the field of battle. Left alone with Madame Bonacieux, he turned toward her. She was a charming woman of about 25 years of age, dark hair, blue eyes, and a nose slightly turned up, admirable teeth, and a complexion marbled with rose and opal.
Ah, monsieur, you have saved me. Permit me to thank you.
Madame, I have only done what every gentleman would have done in my place. You owe me no thanks.
Oh, yes, monsieur, and I hope to prove to you that you have not served an ingrate. But what could these men, whom I first took for robbers, want with me? And why is monsieur not here?
Madame, those men are the agents of the cardinal, and as to your husband, Monsieur Bonacieux, he is not here because he was yesterday evening taken away to the Bastille.
My husband in the Bastille? What could he have done? That poor dear man, he is innocence itself.
I believe that his only crime is to have at the same time the good fortune and the misfortune to be your husband.
But, monsieur, you know then?
I know that you have been carried off, madame.
And does my husband suspect the cause of this event?
He attributed it, I believe, to a political cause, but how did you escape?
I took advantage of a moment at which they left me alone, and with the help of sheets I let myself down from the window. Then, as I concluded my husband would be home, I hastened here.
To place yourself under his protection?
Oh, no, poor dear man. I knew very well that he was incapable of defending me, but as he could be otherwise useful to us, I wished to inform him.
Of what?
That is not my secret. I must not, therefore, tell you.
I see. You are not safe here, madame. I will conduct you to the palace and to the protection of the Queen. And later, having discharged his duty, D'Artagnan took his pensive but longest way homeward. He was thinking of Madame Bonacieux. He already fancied himself, so rapid is the progress of our dreams upon the wings of imagination, accosted by a messenger from the young woman, who brought him some note appointing a meeting. In this condition of grace, D'Artagnan wandered about the city, gazing at the stars in the heavens, sometimes sighing, sometimes smiling. He stopped to share a glass of wine with Athos, then Porthos, and then called upon Aramis, but found him not at home, so that it was quite late when he started for his own quarters. As he rounded a corner, he saw two persons whose appearance very much struck him. One was a man and the other a woman, the latter very much like Madame Bonacieux in size and in step. The man wore the uniform of a musketeer. The woman's hood was pulled down, and the man held a handkerchief to his face. Apparently, both had an interest in not being recognized. They took the bridge. D'Artagnan followed them. He had not gone 20 steps before he became convinced that the woman was really Madame Bonacieux, and the man, Aramis. He felt himself doubly betrayed by his friend and by her whom he already loved as a mistress. D'Artagnan did not reflect that he had only known the landlord's pretty wife for 3 hours, that she owed him nothing but a little gratitude for having delivered her from the black-cloaked men who wished to carry her off, and that she had promised him nothing. He considered himself to be an outraged, betrayed, and ridiculed lover. Blood and anger mounted to his face. He was resolved to unravel the mystery. He decided upon his strategy. He passed them, and then he returned to a spot illuminated by a lamp. The musketeer stopped.
What do you want, monsieur?
He drew back a step, and his foreign accent proved to D'Artagnan that he was deceived in one part of his conjectures at least. "It is not Aramis?"
No, monsieur, it is not Aramis. And by your exclamation, I perceive you have mistaken me for another, and I pardon you.
"You pardon me?"
Yes, allow me then to pass on, since it is not with me you have anything to do.
"You are right, monsieur. It is not with you I have anything to do. It is with Madame."
With madame? You do not know her.
"You are deceived, monsieur. I know her very well."
Take my arm, madame, and let us proceed on our way.
D'Artagnan, however, stupefied, cast down, annihilated by all that had happened so strangely to him, still stood with his arms crossed before the Musketeer and Madame Bonacieux. The Musketeer advanced 2 steps and pushed D'Artagnan aside with his hand. D'Artagnan made a leap backwards and drew his sword. At the same time, and with the rapidity of lightning, the stranger drew his.
In the name of heaven, milord!
"Milord! Milord! Pardon me, monsieur, but are you..."
Milord, the Duke of Buckingham. And now you may ruin us all.
"Milord! Madame, I ask 100 pardons. I love her, milord. I was jealous. You know what it is to love, milord? Pardon me, I beg you. And then, tell me, how may I risk my life to serve your grace?"
You are a brave young man. You offer me your services. With the same frankness, I accept them. Now follow us at a distance of 20 paces to the palace. And if anyone watches us, slay him.
D'Artagnan placed his naked sword under his arm, allowed the Duke and Madame Bonacieux to proceed 20 steps, and then followed them, ready to execute the instructions of the noble and elegant minister of Charles I of England. Once entered into the interior of the court, the Duke and the young woman kept along the wall for about 25 steps. They pushed a little side door, they entered, and found themselves in darkness. They began to ascend a flight of stairs. She turned to the right, introduced a key to a lock, opened the door, and pushed the Duke into an apartment lighted only by a night lamp.
Remain here, milord Duke. Someone will come.
Brave, even rash and enterprising, this was not the first time the Duke had risked his life in such attempts. He had learned that the pretended message from Anne of Austria, upon the faith of which he had come to Paris, was indeed a trap. But instead of returning to England, he had, defying the position in which he had been placed, declared to the Queen that he would not go back again without having seen her. The Queen had at first positively refused, but at length became afraid that the Duke, if exasperated, would commit some rashness. She had decided upon seeing him, and it was Madame Bonacieux who had been charged with going to fetch the Duke and conducting him to the palace. At this moment, a door concealed in the tapestry opened, and a woman appeared. Anne of Austria was in the full splendor of her beauty. Her carriage was that of a queen or a goddess. Her eyes, which cast the brilliancy of emeralds, were perfectly beautiful, and full of sweetness and majesty. Her skin was admired for its velvety softness. Her hands and arms were of surpassing beauty, all the poets of the time singing them as incomparable. Buckingham remained for a moment dazzled. Never had Anne appeared to him so beautiful amid balls and court festivities as she appeared to him at this moment, dressed in a simple robe of white satin. Anne made 2 steps forward. Buckingham threw himself at her feet, and before the Queen could prevent it, kissed the hem of her robe.
Duke, you already know that it is not I who have caused you to be written to.
Yes, madame. Yes, your majesty. I know that I must have been mad, senseless to believe that snow would become animated or marble warm. But what then? They who love easily believe in love. Besides, this voyage is not a loss since I see you.
Yes, I see you because, insensible to all my sufferings, you persist in remaining in a city where, by remaining, you run the risk of your own life and make me run the risk of my honor. I see you to tell you that We must never see each other again.
Oh, how beautiful you are thus. Oh, I love you.
Oh, my God! This is more than I can bear. In the name of heaven, leave me go. I do not know whether I love you or do not love you. But what I know is that I will not be a perjured woman. Take pity on me. Go. Oh, if you are struck in France, if you die in France, if I could imagine that your love for me was the cause of your death, nothing could console me. I should go mad. Depart, I implore you. Come back as ambassador, come back as minister, come back surrounded with guards who will defend you, with servants who will watch over you, and then I shall no longer be in fear for your days, and I shall be happy in seeing you.
Is this true, what you say?
Yes.
Oh, then some pledge of your indulgence, some object which, coming from you, may assure me I have not dreamed. Some thing that you have worn that I may wear in my turn. A ring, a necklace, a chain.
Will you go then? Will you go if I give you what you ask for?
Yes,
You will leave France? You will return to England?
I will. I swear to you I will.
And Anne re-entered her apartment and came out again almost immediately, holding a box in her hands, made of rosewood, with her initials upon it in gold letters.
Here, my lord. Keep this as a memory of me.
Buckingham took the box and fell a second time on his knees.
You promised me you would go.
And I keep my word. Your hand, madame, and I depart.
Anne stretched forth her hand, closing her eyes. Buckingham applied his lips passionately, and then rose.
Within 6 months, if I am not dead, I shall have seen you again, madame. Even if I have confounded the whole world for that object, I shall have seen you again.
Faithful to the promise he had made, with a desperate effort, he rushed from the apartment. In the corridor, he met Madame Bonacieux, who waited for him, and who, with the same precautions and with the same good fortune, conducted him out of the palace. The following evening, Cardinal Richelieu visited the king for their chess game. After a particularly brilliant move, he spoke.
Perhaps you have not heard, sire. Monsieur Buckingham has been in Paris 5 days and only left it this morning.
It is impossible to form an idea of the impression these few words made upon Louis XIII. He grew pale and red alternately, and the cardinal saw at once that he had recovered by a single blow all the ground he had lost due to Tréville's cursed musketeers. The king paced about the room.
Monsieur Buckingham in Paris? And what does he come to do here?
To conspire, no doubt, with your enemies, the Huguenots and the Spaniards.
No! To conspire against my honor.
Oh, sire, what an idea. The queen is too prudent, and besides, loves your majesty too
Woman
well.
is weak, Monsieur le Cardinal. And as to loving me much, I have my own opinion respecting that love.
I not the less maintain that the Duke of Buckingham came to Paris for a project purely political.
And I am sure that he came for quite another purpose. But if the queen be guilty, let her tremble.
Indeed, whatever repugnance I may have to directing my mind to such a treason, your majesty compels me to think of it. The queen's lady-in-waiting, whom according to your majesty's command I have frequently interrogated, told me this morning that the night before last, her majesty sat up very late, that this morning she wept much, and that she has been writing all day.
Ah, that's it to him, no doubt. Cardinal, I must have the queen's papers.
But how to take them, sire? It seems to me that neither your majesty nor I can charge ourselves with such a mission.
You think then, as I do, that she deceives me?
I believe that the queen conspires against the power of the king, but I have not said against his honor.
And I tell you against both. I tell you the queen does not love me. She loves another. She loves that infamous Buckingham. Why did you not cause him to be arrested while he was in Paris?
Arrest the Duke? Arrest the Prime Minister of King Charles I of England? Well, think of it, sire, what a scandal.
But as he acted like a vagabond or a thief, he should have been...
He should have been?
Nothing. Nothing at all. But all the time he was in Paris, did you lose sight of him?
No, sire.
And you are certain that the queen and he did not see each other?
I believe the Queen to have too high a sense of her duties, sire.
But they have corresponded. I must have those letters.
There is but one means.
What is that?
That would be to charge the Chancellor, the Keeper of the Seals, with this mission. The matter enters completely into the duties of his post.
Let him be sent for instantly.
On the 8th day after this meeting, the Cardinal received a letter with a London stamp, which contained these lines.
I have them, but unable to leave London for want of money. Send it, and 4 or 5 days after I have received it, I shall be in Paris. 4 or 5 days after having received the money. It will require 4 or 5 days for the transmission of the money. 4 or 5 days to return. That makes 10 days, not allowing for contrary winds and accidents. We cannot make it altogether less than 12 days.
Well, monsieur, have you a plan?
Yes, sire. Today is the 20th of September. There is a grand ball on the 3rd of October, as you know. That will fall in wonderfully well. Apropos, sire, do not forget to tell Her Majesty before the ball that you should like to see how her diamond studs become her.
It was the second time the Cardinal had mentioned these diamonds to the king. Louis XIII was struck with these repetitions and began to fancy that this recommendation concealed some mystery. More than once the king had been humiliated by the Cardinal's tricks, and he was wary. He went then to the Queen, and according to his custom, accosted her with fresh threats against those who surrounded her. And then he told her the date that had been selected for the ball.
Oh, yes, it is a costume ball, and I particularly wish that you be ornamented with the diamond studs which I gave you on your birthday.
This was terrible. Anne became excessively pale and was unable to utter a single syllable.
You hear, madame?
Yes, sire, I hear.
That's well. I depend upon you.
And with those words, he left. The Queen made a curtsy less from etiquette than because her knees were sinking under her. She knelt upon a cushion and prayed with her head buried between her arms. All at once she heard a voice full of sweetness and pity.
Can I be of service to your Majesty?
The Queen turned sharply round, for there could be no deception in the expression of that voice. It was a friend who spoke thus. In fact, at one of the doors which opened into the Queen's apartment appeared the pretty Madame Bonacieux. She had been engaged in arranging the dresses and linen in the closet when the King entered. She could not get out, and she had heard all.
Oh, fear nothing, madame. I am your Majesty's body and soul. I believe I have discovered a means of extricating your Majesty from your trouble. Those studs which the King speaks of, you gave them to the Duke of Buckingham, did you not? Those studs were in the little rosewood box. Is that not so, madame?
The Queen turned pale.
Oh, my God, my God!
Madame Bonacieux went on.
Well, we must have them back again. Someone must be sent to the Duke.
The Queen was in despair.
But who? And whom can I trust?
Madame Bonacieux placed a hand upon the Queen's arm.
Have confidence in me, madame. Do me that honor, my Queen, and I will find a messenger.
The Queen took the two hands of the young woman with a burst of emotion and gazed at her as if to read her very heart, and seeing nothing but sincerity in her beautiful eyes, embraced her tenderly.
Do that, and you will have saved my life. You will have saved my honor.
Madame Bonacieux hurried to D'Artagnan. I swear to you before God, madame, that if I am taken while accomplishing the orders you give me, I will die sooner than do anything or say anything that may compromise anyone. D'Artagnan was radiant with joy and pride. This secret which he possessed, this woman he loved, confidence and love, made him a giant. I will go at once. He went straight to his patron, Monsieur Tréville.
Did you ask for me, my young friend?
Yes, monsieur. It concerns nothing less than the honor, perhaps the life of the Queen. Chance has rendered me master of a secret I must impart to you, monsieur, for you alone can assist me in the mission I have just received from Her Majesty.
Is this secret your own?
No, monsieur, it is Her Majesty's.
Keep your secret, young man, and tell me what you wish.
I wish to obtain for me a leave of absence for 2 weeks.
Can you tell me whither you go?
To London, sir.
Is anyone an interest in preventing your arriving there?
The cardinal, I believe. I believe he would give anything in the world to prevent my success.
Are you going alone?
I am going alone.
In enterprises of this kind, in order that one may arrive, 4 must set out. I can give to each of you a leave of absence for a fortnight. Athos, whose wound still gives him inconvenience, he can go to the waters of Forges. Porthos and Aramis to accompany their friend.
Thanks, monsieur. You are 100 times kind.
Be gone, then, and find them instantly.
D'Artagnan did find them at their favorite tavern. Porthos spoke at once.
A leave of absence? Where are we going?
To London, gentlemen.
To London? Well, what the devil are we going to do in London?
That's what I'm not at liberty to tell you, gentlemen. You must trust me.
Well, is this campaign upon which we're entering a dangerous one?
A most dangerous one, I give you fair notice.
But if we do risk being killed, at least I should like to know what for.
Is the king accustomed to give you such reasons? No. He says to you very simply, gentlemen, there is fighting going on in Gascony or in Flanders. Go and fight. And you go there. Why, you need not give yourself uneasiness about reasons.
D'Artagnan's right.
It was Athos who spoke up.
There are 3 leaves of absence, so let's go on and get killed where we're told to go. Is life worth the trouble? So many questions. D'Artagnan, I'm ready to follow you.
And I, Porthos.
And I also, Aramis.
I know where to go.
Immediately. We've not a minute to lose. All went well until they arrived at Chantilly. They entered the common room at the inn and placed themselves at a table. A gentleman was seated at the same table and was taking his breakfast. Later, when their horses were ready and they were rising from the table, the stranger proposed to Porthos to drink to the health of the cardinal. Porthos replied that he asked no better if the stranger in his turn would drink to the health of the king. The stranger cried that he acknowledged no other king but his eminence the cardinal. Porthos told him he was drunk, and the stranger drew his sword. Athos judiciously solved this problem.
You've committed a piece of folly, Porthos, but it can't be helped. There's no drawing back. Kill the fellow. Rejoin us as soon as you can.
And the 3 mounted their horses and set out at a good pace, while Porthos was promising his adversary to perforate him with all the thrusts known in the fencing schools. At the next town, they stopped to breathe their horses and to wait for Porthos. But at the end of 2 hours, as Porthos did not come, and as they heard no news of him, they resumed their journey. Further on, where the road was confined between 2 high banks, they came upon 8 or 10 laborers who began to jeer at the travelers, and by their insolence disturbed the equanimity even of the cool Athos, who urged on his horse against one of them. The men all immediately drew back to the ditch, from which each took a concealed musket. The travelers were outnumbered in weapons. Aramis received a ball, which passed through his shoulders. "It is an ambush! Don't waste a charge! Forward!" Aramis, wounded as he was, seized the mane of his horse, which carried him on with the others. He was worried that Porthos, when he came up, would be wounded unsuspectingly. Athos tried to reassure him.
If Porthos were on his legs, he would have rejoined us by this time. My opinion is that when they came to the point, the drunken man proved to be sober enough.
They continued at their best speed for 2 hours, although the horses were so fatigued that it was to be feared that they would soon refuse to go any farther. Then Aramis declared that he could ride no more. In fact, it had required all his courage to bear him that far. He grew more pale every minute, and they were obliged to support him on his horse. They lifted him off at the door of a hotel and left him in the care of the host. They arrived at an inn at midnight. The night passed off quietly enough, and the next morning Athos went down to pay the bill, while D'Artagnan stood at the street door. The host was in a lower and back chamber to which Athos was requested to go. He entered without the least mistrust, and at the same instant 4 men, armed to the teeth, entered by lateral doors and rushed upon him.
I am taken! Go on, D'Artagnan! Spur! Spur!
After a long ride and 100 yards from the gates of Calais, D'Artagnan's horse sank under him and could not be got up again. D'Artagnan rushed toward the port on foot. At 10 o'clock on the following morning, the vessel cast anchor in the port of Dover, and at 10:30, D'Artagnan placed his foot on English soil. But that was not enough. He had to get to London. In England, there were excellent stagecoaches, and he arrived in the capital a few hours later. He did not know London and was not acquainted with one word of English. But he wrote the name of Buckingham on a piece of paper, and everyone to whom he showed it pointed out to him the way to the Duke's hotel. The Duke was at Windsor, hunting with the King. D'Artagnan inquired for the confidential valet of the Duke, who, having accompanied him in all his voyages, spoke French perfectly well. D'Artagnan told him that he came from Paris on an affair of life and death, and that he must speak to the Duke immediately. The confidence with which D'Artagnan spoke convinced Patrick, which was the name of the valet. He ordered 2 horses to be saddled and went himself as guide to the young guardsman. On their arrival at Windsor Castle, they inquired for the Duke, and learned that he was hawking with the King in the marshes at some distance. They rushed quickly to the spot.
Who must I announce to me Lord Duke?
The young man who one evening sought a quarrel with him on a bridge in Paris.
Rather a singular introduction.
You'll find it as good as another.
On receiving this announcement, Buckingham put his horse into a gallop and rode straight up to D'Artagnan.
No misfortune has happened to the Queen.
I believe not. Nevertheless, I believe she is in great peril, from which your grace alone can extricate her. Here, take this letter.
Just heavens, what have I read? Come, monsieur, come!
They set off toward London at full gallop. The horses went like the wind. Shortly they were in London. The Duke, on entering the court of his hotel, walked so fast that D'Artagnan had some trouble in keeping up with him. They arrived at length in a bedchamber, which was at once a miracle of taste and of splendor. In the alcove of this chamber was a door, hidden in the tapestry, which the Duke opened with a small gold key, which he wore suspended from his neck by a chain.
Come in, come in. And if you have the good fortune to be admitted to Her Majesty's presence, tell her what you have seen.
Encouraged by this invitation, D'Artagnan followed the Duke, who closed the door after them. He found himself with the Duke in a small chapel, covered with a tapestry of Persian silk worked with gold. Over an altar and beneath a canopy of blue velvet was a full-length portrait of Anne. Upon the altar and beneath the portrait was the box containing the diamond studs.
There!
The Duke drew from the box a large bow of blue ribbon, all sparkling with diamonds. All at once, he uttered a terrible cry.
No!
What's the matter?
Oh, it's lost! 2 of the studs are missing! There are but 10 of them!
Can you have lost them, my lord? Or do you think they have been stolen?
They have been stolen, and it is the Cardinal who has dealt me this blow. See, the ribbons which have held them have been cut with scissors.
If my lord suspects that they have been stolen, perhaps the person who stole them still has them.
Oh, let me think. The only time I wore these studs was at a ball given by the King a week ago at Windsor. The Countess de Winter, with whom I had a quarrel, became reconciled to me at that ball. That reconciliation was nothing but the vengeance of a jealous woman. I haven't seen her from that day. The woman is an agent of the Cardinal's.
Why, then he has agents throughout the world.
Yes, but the ball that is mentioned in the letter you brought me, when is it to take place?
On Monday next.
Still 5 days before us. That's more time than we want. Patrick, my jeweler, immediately.
Patrick went out and returned with the goldsmith.
Master O'Reilly, look at these diamond studs.
Oh, I say, my lord, they are beautiful diamonds,
Yes,
my lord.
yes, of course. How many days would it require to make 2 studs exactly like them?
Well, my lord, diamonds of this sort, my lord, you don't...
How long, O'Reilly?
Well, I should say, sir, that diamonds faceted in this nature, about a week, my lord.
I will give you 3,000 crowns each for 2, if I can have them the day after tomorrow.
6,000 crowns, my lord. Well then, my lord, you shall have him.
And 2 days later, by 11 o'clock, the 2 diamond studs were finished, and they were so completely imitated, so perfectly alike, that Buckingham could not tell the new ones from the old ones. He immediately called D'Artagnan.
Here are the diamond studs you came to fetch, and be my witness that I have done all that human power could do.
Be satisfied, my lord. I will tell all I have seen. But does your grace mean to give me the studs without the box?
The box would only encumber you. Besides, it is more precious from being all that is left to me. You will say that I keep it.
I will perform your commission, my lord, word for word.
And now, how shall I ever acquit myself of the debt I owe you?
Let us understand each other, my lord. What I have done, then, has been for the queen, and not at all for your grace. And still further, it is very probable that I should not have done any of this if it had not been to make myself agreeable to someone who is my lady, as the queen is yours.
I understand.
In Paris, nothing was talked of but the ball. At midnight, His Majesty, in full dress, accompanied by his royal court, arrived in the hall. Everyone observed that the king looked dull and preoccupied. Half an hour after the entrance of the king, fresh acclamations were heard. These announced the arrival of the queen. She entered the great hall, and it was remarked that, like the king, she looked dull and, moreover, fatigued. At the moment she entered, the curtain of a small gallery, which to that time had been closed, was drawn open, and the pale face of the cardinal appeared. He was dressed as a Spanish cavalier. His eyes were fixed upon those of the queen, and a smile of terrible joy passed over his lips. She did not wear her diamond. The king made his way through the crowd. He went straight to the queen. "Why, madam, why have you not thought proper to wear your diamond studs, when you know it would have given me so much gratification?" The queen cast a glance round her, and saw the cardinal with a diabolical smile on his countenance.
Sire, because in the midst of such a crowd as this, I feared some accident might happen.
"And you were wrong, madame. If I made you that present, it was that you might adorn yourself with them. I tell you again, you were wrong." And the voice of the king was tremulous with anger. The company looked and listened with astonishment, comprehending nothing of what passed.
Sire, I can send for them to the palace where they are, and thus your Majesty's wishes will be complied with.
"Do so, madame, do so, and that is the quickest, for within an hour the ballet will commence." The cardinal drew near to the king, and placed in his hand a small box. The king opened it, and found in it 2 diamonds. "What does this mean?"
Nothing. Only, if the queen has the studs, of which I very much doubt, count them, sire. And if you only find 10, ask her Majesty who can have stolen from her the 2 studs that are here.
Suddenly, a cry of admiration burst from every mouth. If the king appeared to be the first gentleman of his kingdom, the queen was, without doubt, the most beautiful woman in France. It is true that the habit of a huntress became her admirably. This was her costume for the evening. She wore a beaver hat with blue feathers, a jacket of gray pearl velvet fastened with diamond clasps, and a petticoat of blue satin embroidered with silver. Only now, on her left shoulder, sparkled the diamond studs upon a bow of the same color as the plumes and the petticoat. The king trembled with joy, and the cardinal with vexation. Nevertheless, distant as they were from the queen, they could not count the studs. The queen had them. The only question was, had she 10 or 12? At that moment, the orchestra sounded the signal for the ballet. The king advanced toward his partner, Madame la Présidente. They all took their places, and the ballet began. The king, every time he passed the queen, tried to count with his eyes those studs, of which he could not ascertain the number. A cold sweat covered the brow of the cardinal. The ballet lasted an hour, and ended amid the applause of the whole assemblage. Everyone reconducted his lady to her place, but the king took advantage of the privilege he had of leaving his lady to advance eagerly toward the queen. "I thank you, madame, for the deference you have shown my wishes, but I think you are missing 2 of the studs, and I bring them back to you." At these words, he held out to the queen the 2 studs the cardinal had given him.
How, sire? You are giving me 2 more. But then I shall have 14.
The king counted them, and the 12 studs were all on Her Majesty's shoulder. "What does this mean, Monsieur le Cardinal?"
This means, sire, that I was desirous of presenting Her Majesty with these 2 studs, and that not daring to offer them myself, I adopted the means of inducing her to accept them.
And I am the more grateful to your eminence, from being certain these 2 studs have cost you as dearly as all the others cost His Majesty.
And after bowing to the king and the cardinal,
the queen resumed her way to the chamber, where waited the man to whom she owed the extraordinary triumph she had obtained over the cardinal, and who, confounded, unknown, lost in the crowd gathered at one of the doors, looked on at this scene, comprehensible only to 4 persons: the king, the queen, his eminence, and himself. The queen had just regained her chamber, and D'Artagnan was about to leave, when he felt his shoulder lightly touched. He turned around and saw a young woman. She made him a sign to follow her. The face of this young woman was covered with a black velvet mask, but he at once recognized his usual guide, the light and intelligent Madame Bonacieux. On the evening before, they had scarcely seen each other for more than a moment, when D'Artagnan had sent for her. The haste of the young woman to convey to her mistress the excellent news of the happy return of her messenger prevented the 2 lovers from exchanging more than a few words. D'Artagnan now followed her, moved by a double sentiment, love and curiosity. During the whole of the way, as the corridors became deserted, D'Artagnan wished to stop her, seize her, and gaze upon her, were it only for a minute. But quick as a bird, she glided between his hands, and when he wished to speak to her, her finger placed upon her mouth with a little imperative gesture full of grace reminded him that he was under command of a power which he must blindly obey, and which forbade him even to make the slightest complaint. At length, after winding about for what seemed an eternity, Madame Bonacieux opened the door of a room which was entirely dark, and led D'Artagnan into it. There she made another sign of silence, and opening a second door, concealed by a tapestry, she disappeared. D'Artagnan remained for a moment motionless, asking himself where could he be. But soon a ray of light penetrated through the chamber, together with the warm and perfumed air which reached him from the opening. The conversation of 2 or 3 ladies in a language once respectful and elegant, and the word Majesty 2 or 3 times repeated indicated clearly that he was in a room attached to the Queen's chambers. The young man waited quietly in comparative darkness. The Queen sounded cheerful and happy, which seemed to astonish the persons who surrounded her, who were accustomed to see her almost always sad and full of care. Although D'Artagnan did not at all know the Queen, he soon distinguished her voice from the others, at first by a slightly foreign accent, and next by that tone of domination naturally impressed upon all sovereign expressions. He heard her approach, and he withdrew from the partially open door, and 2 or 3 times he even saw the shadow of a person intercept the light. At length, a hand and an arm, surpassingly beautiful in their form and whiteness, glided through the tapestry. D'Artagnan at once comprehended that this was his reward. He cast himself on his knees, seized the hand, and touched it respectfully with his lips. Then the hand was withdrawn, leaving in his an object which he recognized to be a ring. The door immediately closed, and D'Artagnan found himself again in complete darkness. He placed the ring on his finger, and again waited. It was evident that all was not yet over. After the reward of his devotion, that of his love was to come. Besides, although the ballet was danced, the evening's pleasures had scarcely begun. Supper was to be served at 3, and the clock of Saint-Jean had struck 2:15. The sound of voices diminished by degrees in the adjoining chamber. The company was then departing. Then the door of the room in which D'Artagnan was opened, and Madame Bonacieux entered quickly. "You, at last!"
Silence! Silence, and be gone the same way you came.
"But where, and when shall I see you again?"
Soon, very soon. Be gone.
And at these words, she opened the door of the corridor and pushed D'Artagnan out of the room. He obeyed like a child without the least resistance or objection, which proved that he was really in love. But as he made his way through the streets of Paris, he realized sadly that even before this great love must come his duty to his comrades, and that before the sun rose on another day, he must search for Athos and Porthos and Aramis on the road to Calais. D'Artagnan arrived at Chantilly without any accident, and alighted at the inn of Le Grand Saint-Martin, the same that he had stopped at on his first journey. He ordered breakfast and engaged the host in conversation.
Some cheese, monsieur?
Thank you.
No, I was thinking, monsieur, that it is not the first time I've had the honor of seeing monsieur.
Why, I was here only 10 to 12 days ago. I was conducting some friends, Musketeers, one of whom, by the by, had a dispute with a stranger.
Is it not Monsieur Porthos that your lordship means?
Why, to be sure it is. He promised to rejoin us, but we've seen nothing of him.
He has done us the honor to remain here. Certain expenses he's been at.
Well, whatever expenses he may have incurred, I'm certain he is in a condition to pay them.
We thought so too, monsieur. As our concern is carried on very regularly, and we make our bills every week, at the end of 8 days we presented our account. But it appears we had chosen an unlucky moment, for at the first word on the subject, he sent us all to the devil. It is true he had been playing cards the day before.
Playing the day before, eh? And with whom?
Oh, Lord, who can say, monsieur? With some gentleman who was traveling this way, to whom he proposed a game.
That's it, then. The foolish fellow has lost all he had.
Even his horse, monsieur.
Thus, one musketeer was recovered. D'Artagnan, after settling Porthos' account, set out in search of the other two. As he journeyed along, he thought of that young and pretty Madame Bonacieux, who was to have paid him so richly for all his devotedness. Nothing makes time pass more quickly than a thought which absorbs in itself all the facilities of him who thinks. Time has no longer measure. Space has no longer distance. We depart from one place and arrive at another, and that is all. Of the interval past, nothing remains in the memory but a vague mist in which 1,000 confused images of trees, mountains, and landscapes are lost. It was as a prey to this hallucination that D'Artagnan traveled, without his being able to remember on his arrival in the village any of the things he had passed or met with on the road. There only his memory returned to him. He shook his head, saw the inn at which he had left Aramis, and putting his horse to a trot, he shortly pulled up at the door. This time it was not a host, but a hostess who received him, offering him a glass of wine. My good madame,
Yes?
can you tell me what has become of one of my friends, whom we were obliged to leave here about 12 days ago?
He's still here.
Aha, you restore me to life. I'm quite anxious to see him again.
I doubt whether he can see you at this moment.
Oh. Why, so has he a lady with him?
Poor lad. No, monsieur, he has not got a lady with him.
With whom is he, then?
With the curé and the superior of the Jesuits.
Good heavens! Is the poor fellow worse, then?
Oh, no, monsieur, quite the contrary. But after his illness, grace touched him, and he determined to enter the orders.
So, over the next 2 days, the Jesuits and D'Artagnan grappled, as it were, for the soul of Aramis. At length, D'Artagnan prepared to withdraw. So you renounce the world forever, then, eh? That's a settled thing? A resolution decreed?
Forever. You are my friend today. Tomorrow you will be no more to me than a shadow. Or rather, even you will no longer exist for me. As for the world, it is a sepulchre and nothing else. And love is to be cried fie upon.
Well, then, let us say no more about it. And let us just burn this letter.
What letter?
Or letter which was sent to your apartment in your absence, and which was given to me for you.
From whom is that letter?
Oh, from some heartbroken waiting woman, some forlorn actress, some despondent duchess.
Where is it?
Well, I really think I must have lost it. But fortunately, the world is a sepulchre, you see, and men and consequently the women are but shadows. Love is a sentiment upon which you cry fie.
D'Artagnan, you are killing me.
Well, here it is at last. Aramis sprang toward him, seized the letter, read it, or rather devoured it, his countenance absolutely beaming with delight.
She is not faithless. She still loves me. Oh, dear friend, let me embrace you. Happiness almost stifles me.
But now is the moment to consecrate your existence to the King of Kings.
Don't get to the devil with you. Let us drink, my dear D'Artagnan. Let us drink while the wine is fresh. Let us drink heartily. And while we do, tell me something about what is doing in the world yonder.
As you might suspect, the third musketeer, Athos, was found the following day in the cellar of the inn where he had been attacked. He was found not as a prisoner, but with the door locked from the inside, while he sampled the innkeeper's considerable selection of wines. So at length, the four friends were reunited in Paris. On arriving at his apartment, D'Artagnan found a letter from Monsieur de Treville, which informed him that the king had promised that he should be admitted to the company of the Musketeers. Many adventures awaited D'Artagnan and his three trusty henchmen. Their fame spread over France and throughout Europe, and across the sea, over time and space, even unto this very moment.